He was trained to run toward danger, not away from it. A seasoned police detective, a man who had faced gunfire, explosions, and death without blinking. But every night, he froze outside one door in his own house. Inside that room were his twin sons, unable to walk, unable to speak, and a retired German shepherd who refused to leave their side. Then one quiet evening, in the middle of a storm, something happened that no doctor, no badge, no weapon could explain. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Portland, Oregon was not a city that shouted. It breathed slowly, quietly, beneath layers of mist and evergreen shadows. In late November, the rain seemed endless, falling not in dramatic storms, but in a steady, patient drizzle that soaked into clothes, bones, and thoughts. Streets gleamed like dark mirrors under yellow streetlights, and the air smelled of wet asphalt, pine resin, and old leaves rotting gently into the soil. It was a city built for reflection, and for people who carried too much inside. Detective Ethan Cole had once loved it here. Now, Portland felt like a place that watched him endure. Ethan lived on the outskirts of the city, where the neighborhoods thinned and the forest began to press closer, tall fir trees standing like silent witnesses around a modest two-story wooden house. The house had been painted pale gray once, years ago, but time and rain had dulled it into something closer to ash. Moss crept along the edges of the roof. Wind chimes hung untouched on the porch, rusted and mute. Silence lived there. Ethan was 38, though the lines etched into his face made him look older when the light hit him from the wrong angle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, built the way men often became when they learned early that strength was safer than softness. His hair, once dark brown, was now threaded heavily with gray at the temples, usually kept short in the no-nonsense cut required by the Portland Police Bureau. A rough beard shadowed his jaw, not carefully groomed, not fully neglected either, as if shaving had simply slipped down his list of priorities years ago. People at work said he had a stone face. It wasn't unkindness, it was containment. Ethan had been a good cop, still was by most standards. Calm under pressure, methodical, the kind of detective who listened more than he spoke, who remembered details others dismissed. There had been a time when his restraint came from discipline. Now it came from survival. He parked his unmarked sedan beneath the tall cedar at the edge of the driveway and sat there longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, engine still running. The house waited ahead of him, dark except for one dim light glowing upstairs. He knew which room it was without needing to think, the children's room. Eventually, he turned off the engine and stepped out into the rain. It soaked his jacket instantly, the cold seeping in as if it knew exactly where to find him. He didn't rush. There was no one inside the house waiting at the door anymore. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic wipes and old wood. The floors creaked under his boots. A bucket hung on the back of a chair, small and forgotten. Toys lay untouched where they had been left, carefully arranged by therapists who came and went like strangers passing through a museum. The living room television was off. It always was. Then he heard it, the soft thump of movement from the hallway. A large shape rose slowly, from the corner near the stairs, dark against the shadows. Rex, the German shepherd, padded toward him with deliberate calm. Rex was nearly 9 years old now, his muzzle dusted with gray, one ear permanently tilted from an old injury. He was a big dog even by shepherd standards. Muscular but not aggressive, his amber eyes alert yet tired in the way working dogs often became when they were asked to stop working. Rex had once been a canine unit dog, trained for tracking and search and rescue. He had saved lives. He had pulled victims from collapsed buildings. Then a warehouse explosion ended his career, leaving his hearing damaged and his nerves permanently on edge around loud sounds. The department labeled him unfit for service. Ethan had brought him home the same week the world had ended. Rex stopped in front of him and sat, tail thumping once against the floor, slow and heavy. Ethan reached down automatically, resting a hand on the dog's broad head. The fur was warm, solid, real. Rex leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly. "You're up," Ethan murmured, voice low. Rex stayed close as Ethan moved through the hallway toward the stairs. The light upstairs cast a thin yellow stripe across the wall, like a line drawn where Ethan never crossed. He paused at the bottom step. He always did. 3 years ago, the sound of laughter had lived up there. So had Maya. Maya Cole had been small where Ethan was large, slender and quick, with dark skin the color of warm coffee, and hair she wore in loose curls that framed her face no matter how she tied it back. She laughed easily, loudly, the kind of woman who touched people when she spoke, who believed feelings were meant to be shared, not hidden. She worked as a physical therapist, loved puzzles, and sang terribly while cooking. Ethan had fallen in love with her because she walked into his life and refused to tiptoe around his quiet. The accident came on a rain-soaked highway not unlike this one. A drunk driver, a spun car, metal folding like paper. Maya survived long enough to give birth at 28 weeks, long enough to tell Ethan not to let the boys disappear into silence. She did not survive long enough to see them open their eyes. Noah and Eli were 3 years old now. Twins, identical in bone structure, but different in spirit, the doctor said. Both had suffered neurological damage from oxygen deprivation. Neither could walk. Neither spoke beyond sounds that never quite became words. Their days were scheduled, measured in exercises and appointments, progress charts pinned neatly to clipboards. Ethan knew every diagnosis by heart. He just couldn't bring himself to know them as children. He climbed the stairs slowly and stopped outside the bedroom door. The door was open, just a crack, enough to hear breathing, enough to see the nightlight shaped like a small moon glowing near the floor. Rex lay down behind him, resting his head on his paws, eyes fixed on the door. Inside, Noah lay. In his crib, dark lashes resting against pale cheeks, chest rising unevenly. Eli was awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand twitching slightly as if reaching for something just out of sight. A soft sound escaped his throat, not a cry, not a word, just effort. Ethan stood there, heart pounding, unable to move forward or back. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He told himself he would step in tomorrow. He always did. He closed the door quietly and turned away. Downstairs, Rex followed him into the kitchen. Ethan poured himself a glass of water. He didn't drink, and leaned against the counter, staring out the rain-streaked window at the forest pressing close around the house. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked under the weight of water. The city felt very far away. Rex rose and placed his head against Ethan's thigh, solid and grounding. Ethan exhaled slowly and rested his hand on the dog's neck. "I don't know how to do this," he said aloud, to no one who could answer. Rex stayed. Outside, Portland kept raining, patient and unrelenting. Inside the house, 2 children slept, a dog kept watch, and a man stood very still, trying not to break under the weight of a silence he had helped build. The house did not speak, not yet. The rain in Portland did not stop overnight. It only changed its rhythm, thinning into a fine mist that clung to skin and fabric like memory. Morning arrived without sunlight, the sky a pale, exhausted gray that made time feel suspended. Ethan Cole stood at the kitchen sink, staring into a mug of coffee that had gone untouched, listening to the quiet sounds of the house waking without truly coming alive. Upstairs, Noah coughed softly. Eli made a low, uneven sound that hovered between discomfort and effort. Ethan recognized the noises the way soldiers recognize distant gunfire, by instinct, without needing explanation. But his feet did not move toward the stairs. Instead, he set the mug down and rested both hands on the counter, shoulders squared, jaw tight. Rex lay near the back door, his long body stretched out across the cold floor. The dog lifted his head when Ethan shifted, ears twitching unevenly, one ear still damaged from the blast years ago. His eyes followed Ethan with quiet expectation, not judgment. Rex never asked more than Ethan could give, and perhaps that was why Ethan trusted him. At exactly 9 o'clock, a car pulled into the driveway. The sound was unfamiliar enough to make Ethan stiffen. He glanced through the window, watching a small blue sedan park beneath the cedar tree. The engine shut off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out into the mist. Her name was Claire Rowan. She was not what Ethan had expected, though he wasn't sure what he had expected at all. Claire was in her early 30s, average height, with a slim but sturdy frame that suggested endurance rather than fragility. Her hair was a warm brown, pulled back into a low, practical knot at the nape of her neck, already darkened by rain. A few strands escaped and clung to her cheek. Her skin was fair, marked faintly by freckles across her nose, and her face held a quiet seriousness, softened by gentle eyes the color of wet earth. She wore a simple gray coat, worn but clean, and carried herself with an unhurried steadiness, as if she had learned long ago that rushing rarely improved outcomes. When she reached the porch, she paused briefly, taking in the house, the trees, the silence. Not with judgment, with attention. Ethan opened the door before she could knock. "Yes?" he said, his voice neutral, professional. Claire looked up at him and met his gaze without flinching. "Detective Cole," she said. Her voice was low, calm, neither timid nor overly confident. "I'm Claire Rowan." She extended her hand. Ethan hesitated a fraction of a second before shaking it. Her grip was firm but gentle, warm despite the cold air. He noticed the faint calluses on her palm, the kind earned from work, not leisure. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Rex rose slowly from the floor, his nails clicking softly against the wood as he approached. He stopped a few feet from Claire, head lowered slightly, eyes alert. Many people grew nervous around German shepherds. Claire did not. She knelt without hesitation, keeping her movements slow, deliberate, allowing Rex to decide the distance. Up close, Rex was an imposing sight, over 90 pounds of muscle and fur, his coat a mix of deep black and tan, his muzzle silvered with age. "Hi," Claire murmured, not reaching out. "You must be Rex." Rex sniffed the air around her, tail still. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he sat. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Rex did not sit for strangers. Claire glanced up at Ethan, a flicker of something like understanding passing through her eyes. "He's listening," she said softly. "Not to me, to the room." Ethan said nothing. They moved inside. Claire removed her coat, folding it neatly over the back of a chair without being asked. She took in the living room quickly, the unused toys, the medical equipment disguised as furniture, the absence of personal photographs except for one framed image on the far wall. Maya's smile shone from the picture, frozen in a moment before everything broke. Claire's gaze lingered there for half a second longer than necessary. She didn't comment. "I'll be helping with daily care and light therapy," she said, slipping into practicality. "I've reviewed the medical notes you sent. I'll follow the existing plans unless you want adjustments discussed first." "Stick to the plan," Ethan replied. Control was easier when everything had instructions. "Of course," Claire said. Upstairs, the children stirred again. Claire turned instinctively toward the sound. Ethan noticed. "They're up there," he said unnecessarily. "I know," she answered, still gentle. "May I?" He nodded once. The nursery smelled faintly of clean linen and something sterile beneath it. Light filtered weakly through the curtains. Noah lay on his side, eyes half open, lashes damp. Eli stared at the ceiling, his brow furrowed as if concentrating on something. Invisible. Their faces were pale, their bodies small for their age, fragile in a way that made Ethan's chest tighten. Claire approached slowly. She knelt beside Eli's crib first, placing her hand on the railing so he could see it before she spoke. "Good morning, Eli," she said, enunciating clearly but softly. "My name is Claire." Eli's fingers twitched. His eyes shifted, unfocused but searching. "That's good," she whispered, as if encouraging a great effort. "That's enough for now." She turned to Noah next, mirroring the same calm, measured movements. Noah made a small sound, something like frustration. Claire did not rush to stop it. She waited, breathing evenly, letting the sound exist without fear. Ethan stood by the door, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He had watched countless specialists work with his sons. They were efficient, kind, detached. Claire was different in a way he could not immediately define. Behind him, Rex lay down just inside the doorway, chin on his paws, eyes fixed on the children. His presence seemed to ground the room, like an anchor dropped quietly into deep water. As Claire worked, she spoke little, narrating only what mattered. "I'm going to help you stretch now. I'm here." That's enough. Her voice did not fill the space. It respected it. An hour passed without Ethan noticing. When Claire finally stepped back, she exhaled softly. "They're tired," she said, "but they listened." "They don't understand words," Ethan said, more sharply than intended. Claire looked at him then, really looked. There was no challenge in her expression, only certainty. "They understand presence," she replied. "Words come later." Ethan felt something shift uncomfortably in his chest. Rex rose and moved closer to Claire, settling beside her leg. She rested her hand briefly on his head, not possessive, just acknowledging. Outside, the rain continued its patient fall. Inside the house, something subtle had changed. Not hope, not yet. But the silence felt different. For the first time in years, Ethan did not rush Claire out when her time was up. He watched as she gathered her things, as Rex followed her to the door and stopped, tail low, ears alert. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. Ethan nodded. The house remained quiet after she left, but it no longer felt entirely empty. Portland settled into a pattern after Claire Rowan began coming every morning. The rain remained, but it softened, drifting rather than falling, as if the city itself had learned to slow down. Ethan noticed small changes first, not in the children, but in the house. The air no longer felt stagnant. The silence had texture now, interrupted by the measured cadence of Claire's voice, by the faint scrape of chair legs, by Rex's steady breathing, as he stationed himself near the nursery door, like a sentry who had chosen a new post. Ethan watched from a distance. He told himself it was professional caution, the habit of a detective trained to observe before acting. In truth, it was fear, quiet, persistent fear, that if he stepped closer, something fragile would break. On the fourth morning, Ethan did not leave for work. He stood in the hallway, pretending to review case notes on his phone while Claire worked with Noah and Eli. She had changed her routine slightly, not enough to disrupt them, just enough to explore. She hummed now, not a song with words, just a low vibration that rose and fell in a gentle arc. The sound filled the room, without demanding attention. Noah's eyes followed her hand as she moved a soft cloth across the crib rail. Eli's fingers curled and uncurl, slow and uncertain, like he was testing the world one sensation at a time. Rex lay beside Ethan, his body angled toward the nursery. At 9 years old, Rex moved less than he used to, joints stiff on cold mornings, but his focus remained sharp. His coat had thinned slightly along the spine, revealing faint scars beneath the fur, remnants of service, of a life spent responding to commands and danger. He no longer wore a vest. He no longer waited for orders. He chose. Inside the nursery, Claire lowered herself to the floor, bringing herself level with the cribs. "You're doing enough," she murmured, not to the children alone. The words seemed to settle into the walls. Then it happened. It was not dramatic. There was no sudden movement, no bright-eyed revelation. Eli's chest rose unevenly, and a sound slipped free, thin, strained, almost swallowed by the air. It was not a word. It barely qualified as intention. But it was shaped, directed. "Ah." Claire froze. Ethan felt his pulse spike. He leaned forward without realizing it, one hand gripping the doorframe. Rex's ears lifted, asymmetrical but alert. Claire did not react outwardly. She did not smile. She did not praise. She simply waited, eyes soft, breathing steady, allowing space for whatever came next. Eli's brow furrowed, his lips trembled. The sound came again, a little clearer this time, still fragile, still uncertain. "Ah," Claire exhaled slowly. "I hear you," she said. Ethan stepped back, heart pounding violently against his ribs. He did not enter the room. He could not. The sound echoed in his head, looping, unfinished, demanding nothing and everything all at once. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove to the precinct. The building felt harsher than usual, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, the smell of burnt coffee and damp wool clinging to the air. He nodded at officers he'd known for years, accepted murmured greetings, but his thoughts stayed behind in the nursery. In the bullpen, Detective Mark Alvarez leaned against Ethan's desk, arms crossed. Mark was mid-40s, broad through the chest with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow that darkened his angular jaw. His hair had retreated steadily over the years, leaving behind a widow's peak he had long since stopped trying to disguise. Mark had once been Ethan's field partner, before a botched undercover operation left him with a permanent limp and a quieter disposition. "You look like hell," Mark said without malice. "Thanks," Ethan replied, dropping into his chair. Mark studied him, sharp eyes softened by familiarity. "You sleep?" Ethan didn't answer. Mark sighed and pulled up a chair. "Internals. Sniffing around again," he said. "The warehouse case. They're not saying it outright, but they want to know if you froze." Ethan's jaw tightened. The warehouse explosion, sirens, smoke, screams flashed through his mind. He had hesitated. Not long, just long enough. "I didn't freeze," Ethan said flatly. "I know," Mark replied, "but they don't." Ethan nodded once. control, evidence, facts. These were things he understood. When he returned home that evening, dusk had settled early, the sky bruised purple beneath the clouds. Claire was finishing up, packing away a small bag of therapy tools. She moved efficiently, quietly. Rex followed her as she crossed the living room, stopping when she stopped, mirroring her pace. Ethan lingered near the stairs. "That sound," he said finally. His voice caught slightly. "Earlier." Claire turned to face him. In the dim light, her face looked older, shadows deepening beneath her eyes. There was something careful in her expression now. "It wasn't a word," she said gently. "I know. But it was intentional," she continued. "That matters." Ethan nodded. Don't push it." "I won't," Claire replied. "This isn't about pushing." She hesitated, then added, "May I suggest something?" He gestured for her to continue. "Stay," she said. "Not in the room, just nearby. Let them hear you exist." Ethan swallowed. The suggestion felt heavier than it should have. I don't know how," he admitted. Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded as if confirming something she had already suspected. "You don't have to do anything," she said. "Just be consistent." After she left, Ethan stood in the hallway longer than usual. Rex settled beside him, leaning his weight into Ethan's leg with quiet insistence. Upstairs, Noah slept. Eli lay awake, eyes drifting toward the door, fingers twitching slightly, as if searching for a familiar sound. Ethan took one step closer. He didn't enter the room, but he didn't walk away either. Outside, the rain began again, light and patient, tapping against the roof like a promise not yet spoken. The storm arrived without ceremony, the way most things did in Portland. There was no warning on the news that Ethan remembered hearing, no dramatic shift in the sky at first. Just a steady darkening, clouds layering over one another until the afternoon seemed to collapse into early night. By the time Ethan pulled into the driveway, rain was falling hard enough to blur the forest into a single moving shadow. He shut off the engine and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel. The house stood ahead of him, lights glowing faintly through the rain. Rex lifted his head from the passenger seat, letting out a low sound that was not quite a bark. At 9 years old, Rex had learned the language of weather the way sailors did. Storms unsettled him. Loud thunder still made his muscles tense, a reminder of the explosion that had ended his service and reshaped his instincts. "I know," Ethan muttered, opening the door. Inside, the house smelled warmer than usual, clean fabric, faint. Chamomile from a diffuser Claire had left running. That detail caught him off guard. Claire had not asked. She had simply noticed that the children slept better when the air carried something soft instead of sterile. Upstairs, a small sound drifted down the stairwell. Noah, restless. Eli, awake. Ethan paused at the bottom of the stairs, the same place he always paused. But tonight, the air felt heavier, charged. Rex brushed past him and climbed 2 steps before stopping and looking back, ears tilted unevenly, eyes questioning. Ethan followed. In the nursery, Claire was already there. She sat on the floor between the cribs, legs folded beneath her, her cardigan draped loosely over her shoulders. Her hair was down tonight, falling in soft waves around her face, giving her a gentler, almost younger look. But the shadows under her eyes told a different story. Someone who slept lightly, who listened for trouble, even when none announced itself. "You stayed late," Ethan said quietly. Claire glanced up. "The pressure dropped fast," she replied. "They felt it." As if to confirm her words, thunder cracked overhead, sharp and sudden. Eli startled violently, his breath hitching into short, panicked gasps. Noah whimpered, his hands flexing uselessly against the mattress. Before Ethan could move, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then everything went dark. The hum of electricity vanished, replaced by the sound of rain battering the roof and wind tearing through the trees. The house creaked, old wood responding to the shift in pressure. Rex whined sharply, nails scraping against the floor as he moved closer to the cribs, body low, protective. "It's okay," Claire said immediately, her voice steady, though her own breath quickened. "I'm here." Another thunderclap exploded directly overhead. Eli cried out, a raw, broken sound that tore through Ethan's chest. Noah followed, his cry higher, thinner, panicked. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. It was the warehouse again, the noise, the sudden loss of control, the split second where his body refused to respond. Claire acted. She rose in one smooth motion and lifted Eli from his crib, supporting his head carefully against her shoulder. Noah's cries spiked, sharp with fear. Rex pressed his body against the side of Noah's crib, a living barrier, his presence solid and grounding. "Ethan," Claire said, not loudly, not urgently. "Can you help me?" The words cut through the fog. Not a command. An invitation. Ethan moved. He crossed the room and lifted Noah into his arms. The child was lighter than he remembered. Too light, his body tense and trembling. Noah's face pressed into Ethan's chest, fists bunching in the fabric of his jacket. The sensation was overwhelming. Warmth, fragility, reality. Thunder roared again. Rex flinched but did not retreat, planting himself between the window and the group, head low, teeth bared at the storm as if it were an intruder he could drive. Away. Claire began to hum. Not the same sound as before. This was lower, steadier. A vibration felt more than heard. Ethan felt it through Noah's small body, through his own ribcage. Claire's free hand rested on Eli's back, fingers moving in slow, predictable patterns. Eli's cries softened first, breaking into uneven sobs. Noah followed, breath hitching, then slowing. The darkness pressed in around them, thick and uncertain, but within the circle they formed, something held. The backup generator kicked in after what felt like an eternity, but was likely less than a minute. Lights flickered back to life, weak at first, then steady. The storm did not stop, but it receded slightly, thunder moving farther away. Ethan realized his arms were shaking. "I've got him," he said hoarsely, though Claire had not asked. "I know," she replied. She didn't rush to put Eli down. She waited until his breathing evened out, until his fingers loosened their grip on her sweater. When she finally lowered him back into the crib, she did it slowly, narrating each movement so he would not be startled. Noah remained in Ethan's arms. Ethan did not put him down. Noah's head rested beneath Ethan's chin, his breathing shallow but steady. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan allowed himself to feel the full weight of his child against him. It was terrifying. It was grounding. It was unavoidable. "I'm sorry," Ethan said suddenly. The words escaped before he could stop them. "I didn't—" Claire shook her head gently. "Not now." Rex approached and rested his head against Ethan's knee, his large body finally relaxing as the tension eased. Up close, the scars along Rex's flank were visible in the restored light. Thin, pale lines beneath short fur, proof of a life lived in service and survival. "Good boy," Ethan whispered, absently. Later, when the storm had dulled into a distant murmur and both children slept again, Claire gathered her things, quietly. She moved with the care of someone who did not want to disturb a fragile balance. At the door, she hesitated. "Tonight mattered," she said softly. "Not because of what happened, because of what didn't." Ethan nodded. He couldn't speak. After she left, Ethan sat in the nursery chair, Noah still in his arms, long past the point where he should have returned him to the crib. Rex lay at his feet, eyes half closed, exhausted but content. Outside, rain continued to fall. Inside, for the first time since Maya died, the house did not feel like it was holding its breath. Morning came clean after the storm, the kind of clear that felt earned rather than given. Portland's sky was a pale blue rinsed of gray, sunlight slipping between the fir trees and catching on the wet leaves like small deliberate sparks. The house looked different in that light, not brighter exactly, just less guarded. Ethan woke in the nursery chair with his neck stiff and his arm numb where Noah's weight had rested through the night. For a moment, panic flared. Had he done something wrong? Let the child sleep improperly? Then Noah stirred, a small sound escaping him. Not distress, just acknowledgement. Ethan adjusted his hold carefully, every movement slow and deliberate. Rex lifted his head from the rug, tail giving one measured thump. Approval without celebration. Ethan stood when he was sure Noah was settled back in the crib, his hands lingering on the rail longer than necessary. The imprint of the night remained in his body, the echo of thunder, the weight of his son, the certainty that he had not turned away when it mattered. That certainty scared him more than the storm had. Downstairs, Claire was already in the kitchen. She had changed into a clean sweater, soft green, sleeves pushed to her forearms, and her hair was pulled back again, practical and contained. She stood at the counter slicing apples into careful, even wedges, the knife moving with quiet competence. A faint scar crossed the inside of her wrist, thin and pale, visible when the light struck at the right angle. "You didn't have to stay," Ethan said, his voice rough from sleep. Claire didn't look up. "I wanted to." He accepted that without argument. The truth was becoming easier to hear when it wasn't dressed up as obligation. They worked in parallel for a while, Ethan brewing coffee, Claire arranging breakfast trays suitable for the children's routines. It felt domestic in a way that unsettled him. At the same time, it grounded him, like placing weight on a wound so it would remember how to hold itself together. When the children were settled with Rex nearby, Claire finally sat across from Ethan at the small kitchen table. The light caught her face fully now, revealing tiredness she hadn't allowed herself to show before. Not weakness. Where? You stayed with him, she said softly. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. I didn't plan to. Most important things aren't planned. He watched her fingers curl around her mug, knuckles whitening briefly before relaxing. The movement was small, involuntary. Like a reflex she didn't bother to hide anymore. There's something you should know, Claire said. Ethan didn't interrupt. He had learned, slowly, that listening without steering was its own kind of strength. I didn't come to Portland just for the job, she continued. I came because it's quiet enough to disappear in. She paused, eyes drifting to the window where Rex lay stretched in a square of sunlight, his breathing slow and even. I had a child, she said, a son. The words settled between them, heavy and precise. His name was Samuel, Claire went on, voice steady but distant, as if reading from a place already mapped. He was 6 months old when he died. A congenital heart condition that wasn't caught in time. He looked healthy. Everyone said he was fine. And then he wasn't. Ethan felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the reflexive urge to say something that would soften the edges. He resisted it. I stayed functional, Claire said. I went back to work. I did what people expect you to do when they don't know what else to offer. But I couldn't stay where every corner knew his name. She lifted her gaze to Ethan then. There was no plea in her eyes, no request for sympathy, just truth, unvarnished. When I work with Noah and Eli, she said, I'm not replacing anyone. I'm not pretending something that isn't there. I'm just present. Ethan nodded slowly. I get that. He surprised himself with how much he meant it. The rest of the morning unfolded quietly. Claire worked with the boys, adjusting small routines, building on the trust established during the storm. Ethan stayed nearby, not hovering, not retreating. He read case notes at the dining table, aware of the sounds from the nursery. Claire's voice, Rex shifting positions, the faint scrape of a toy against the crib rail. In the early afternoon, the doorbell rang. Ethan stiffened automatically, instincts flaring. Rex rose, ears forward, stance alert but controlled. Ethan opened the door to find Lena Whitaker on the porch. She was in her early 50s, tall and spare, with sharp cheekbones and hair pulled into a severe silver ponytail. She wore a practical navy coat and carried a leather folder pressed flat against her chest. Her expression was neutral in the way professionals cultivated when their work required boundaries more than warmth. Detective Cole, she said, I'm Lena Whitaker, Child and Family Services. Ethan stepped aside without comment. He had known this visit was coming. Therapists, aides, reviews. Systems did not trust change without documentation. Lena moved efficiently through the house, her eyes cataloging details with practiced detachment. She acknowledged Claire with a polite nod, but no immediate questions, saving those for later. In the nursery, she observed quietly, making notes as Claire worked with the boys, noting Rex's presence with a raised eyebrow. He's retired K9, Ethan said, trained, calm. Lena watched Rex for a moment longer, then nodded. I see that. Her assessment concluded without drama. At the door, she paused. They respond to consistency, she said. Whatever you're doing, it's helping. Ethan closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. That went better than expected, Claire said. Ethan gave a humorless smile. Low bar. That evening, after Claire left and the house settled into its new rhythm, Ethan stood at the nursery door. The light was low. Noah slept. Eli lay awake, eyes tracking the shape of the door. Ethan stepped inside. He didn't speak. He didn't reach out. He simply sat in the chair beside the crib, breathing steadily, letting the moment exist without demands. Rex followed and lay at his feet, a silent witness. Eli's gaze fixed on him. His lips moved, soundless at first, then a small exhale shaped itself into something tentative and fragile. Duh. It wasn't clear. It wasn't certain. It wasn't a word that could be claimed. Ethan closed his eyes, just for a second. He didn't respond. He didn't correct. He stayed. and that was enough for tonight. The call came just after dawn, the hour when Portland hovered between sleep and motion. Ethan was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a bottle, when his phone vibrated against the counter. The screen lit with a precinct number. For a moment, he let it ring. Outside, the morning fog curled low around the trees, softening the world into something almost forgiving. Rex lay near the doorway, chin on his paws, watching Ethan with the patient attention of a dog who understood hesitation better than most humans ever could. Ethan answered, "Cole." The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Harold Finch, a man in his late 50s with a gravel-edged baritone and a face permanently weathered by too many nights on the job. Finch was tall, lean, his hair cut close to the scalp, gray at the temples, and his beard always trimmed with military precision. He had come up through homicide in the 80s, learned to survive by compartmentalizing everything that couldn't be filed neatly, under evidence or procedure. Compassion, when it surfaced, did so quietly and without ceremony. "Warehouse review hearing's been moved up," Finch said. 9 a.m. You're expected." Ethan closed his eyes. The bottle slipped from his hand into the sink with a dull clatter. "I can't," he said. There was a pause. Finch didn't raise his voice. He rarely did. "You don't miss these, Ethan." "I am today." Silence stretched. Ethan imagined Finch on the other end, standing in his office with its bare walls and neatly stacked files, jaw tightening, eyes calculating consequences. "You want to explain that?" Finch asked. Ethan glanced toward the hallway. Upstairs, Noah slept. Eli lay awake, quiet, listening. He could feel the weight of last night still on his chest, the echo of a sound that might one day become a word. "My kids need me," Ethan said simply. Another pause, longer this time. "Take the day," Finch said at last. "But this doesn't go away." "I know." When the call ended, Ethan stood motionless, phone still in his hand. He had chosen something. He wasn't sure yet what it would cost him. Claire arrived mid-morning, carrying a canvas tote instead of her usual therapy bag. She wore a soft denim jacket over a simple shirt, her hair braided loosely down her back. The braid had come undone in places, strands escaping around her face. She looked tired, but there was a steadiness in her posture that hadn't been there weeks ago. "You're home," she said, surprised. "I stayed," Ethan replied. She nodded, understanding more than he had said. They worked together without formal roles. Ethan fed Noah, clumsy but careful, wiping his chin too often, apologizing under his breath when the spoon clinked against the bowl. Claire guided his hands once, gently, then stepped back. Rex lay nearby, tail flicking slowly, as if supervising. Later, Claire suggested they go outside. "The air's different today," she said. "It might help." The yard behind the house sloped gently toward the trees, the grass still damp from the night's mist. Ethan hesitated only a moment before agreeing. He hadn't taken the boys beyond the porch in months. The world felt too unpredictable, but Claire moved with purpose, arranging blankets, positioning the boys carefully, narrating each step so nothing came as a shock. Rex trotted ahead, ears forward, scanning the tree line with habitual vigilance. His gait was slower than it once had been, the stiffness in his back legs more pronounced on uneven ground, but his presence radiated assurance. Ethan sat on the grass with Noah beside him, the child leaning awkwardly against his thigh. Eli lay on the blanket, eyes fixed on the shifting light above. A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Ethan breathed. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he was waiting for something to go wrong. The sound of tires on gravel broke the soul. Moment. A dark sedan pulled into the driveway. Ethan's shoulders tensed instantly. Rex stood, body angling forward, a low sound rumbling in his chest. The driver's door opened, and Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out. Brooks was in his early 30s, tall and narrow-shouldered, with a baby face that clashed with the thick beard he kept in an attempt to look older than he felt. His hair was sandy blonde, perpetually messy, and his eyes held a restless energy that suggested a man still proving himself. Brooks had been Ethan's junior partner for the past year, eager, competent, and sometimes too quick to rush toward danger. "Sorry to drop by," Brooks said, raising his hand slightly when he saw Rex. "Captain sent me, said you weren't answering." Ethan stood slowly, keeping his body between Brooks and the children without thinking. "I took the day." Brooks glanced at the boys, his expression softening. "I didn't know they... I mean, you do now," Ethan said, not unkindly. Brooks nodded, shifting his weight. Internals pressing. They want a statement. Captain's buying you time, but not much. Ethan looked back at Noah, at Eli, at Claire kneeling beside them, her hand resting lightly on the blanket. He felt the familiar pull, duty, expectation, the structure that had once defined him. "I'll come in tomorrow," Ethan said. "Not today." Brooks studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." After Brooks left, the yard felt quieter than before. Ethan sat back down, heart still racing. "That was hard," Claire said softly. "Yes. You did it anyway." He nodded, unable to trust his voice. As afternoon faded into evening, the boys grew tired. Claire suggested bringing them inside. Ethan carried Noah this time without prompting, adjusting his grip instinctively. Noah's fingers curled into Ethan's shirt, holding. In the nursery, Ethan sat in the chair again, Noah against his chest. Claire tended to Eli nearby, humming under her breath. Rex lay stretched across the doorway, content, vigilant. Ethan looked down at his son. "I'm here," he whispered. The words felt strange, heavy with meaning. He didn't know if Noah understood them. He understood himself. Noah shifted. His lips parted. A sound formed, uncertain, but deliberate. "Da." Ethan did not move. He did not correct. He did not respond aloud. He stayed. Outside, the day ended quietly. No storms, no sirens, just the steady breathing of a house learning how to hold its people. The hearing room had no windows, only fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead, flattening every color into the same tired shade of gray. Ethan Cole arrived early, as he always did when the stakes were high. He wore a plain navy suit, no tie, his beard trimmed closer than usual. The lines along his jaw seemed sharper today, carved by nights without sleep and mornings that demanded resolve before the body was ready to give it. He sat alone at the narrow table, hands folded, breathing steady. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. This place did not care about storms survived or children held through the night. It cared about procedure. Across from him, folders were stacked neatly, their tabs marked with dates and codes, evidence, timelines, decisions dissected until intent became irrelevant. The door opened precisely at 9. Deputy Chief Eleanor Park entered first. She was in her early 60s, petite, with iron-straight posture and hair cut into a precise, silver bob that framed her face like a deliberate line. Her eyes were dark and observant, the kind that missed nothing and forgave little. She had built her career navigating politics without losing her sense of control, a balance that had cost her friendships and earned her authority. Behind her came Internal Affairs investigator Thomas Keene. Keene was tall, broad, his presence filling the room before he spoke. He had a thick, neatly trimmed beard streaked with gray, and a face weathered by years of confrontation. His suit jacket strained slightly at the shoulders, suggesting a man who had once relied on physicality before learning the sharper power of questions. Keene had been injured early in his career, an on-duty shooting that left a faint limp and a permanent edge to his patience. He believed deeply in accountability, perhaps because it had once failed him. They took their seats. The door closed. "Detective Cole," Park said, her voice level, "we're here to review your actions during the warehouse incident 3 months ago." Ethan nodded. "I understand." Keene slid a folder forward. "You hesitated," he said without preamble. 6 seconds between command and engagement. "Yes." "Why?" Ethan's mind flickered, not to the warehouse, but to the nursery, to Noah's weight against his chest, to Eli's eyes tracking the door. He kept his voice even. "Because I assessed the risk." Keene leaned back slightly. "That assessment resulted in a suspect escaping." "Yes." Park steepled her fingers. "You've never hesitated before." "That's not true," Ethan replied. "I've hesitated plenty. I just didn't survive long enough for it to be recorded." Silence stretched. Keene studied him closely, eyes narrowing. "You've had changes at home." Ethan did not flinch. "Yes." "Do those changes affect your judgment?" Ethan met Park's gaze. "They sharpen it." Park's expression remained unreadable. "You took a personal day yesterday?" "Yes." Keene's brow lifted. "During an active review?" "Yes." Park exhaled slowly. "Detective Cole, this department needs officers who can be relied upon without reservation." Ethan nodded. So do my children. The words landed heavier than he intended. Keene's jaw tightened. Park's eyes flickered, not with anger, but calculation. We will deliberate, Park said. For now, you're placed on administrative leave pending outcome. Ethan absorbed the sentence without visible reaction. Leave meant distance. Distance meant time. I understand, he said. When he stepped back into the daylight, the city felt louder than before. Sirens in the distance, traffic hissing along wet streets, life continuing without pause. He drove home slowly. Claire was in the living room when he arrived, kneeling on the floor beside the low therapy table. She wore a loose cream-colored sweater, sleeves pushed up, her hair tied back, with a ribbon Noah had somehow fixated on. Rex lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. She looked up when Ethan entered. She saw it immediately, the set of his shoulders, the quiet weight behind his eyes. Administrative leave, Ethan said before she could ask. Claire nodded once. How do you feel? Ethan considered the question. Relieved, he admitted, and terrified. Both can be true. They worked through the afternoon together. Ethan stayed close, adjusting pillows, learning the rhythm of care without instruction. He wasn't efficient. He was present. As evening settled, Claire gathered her things more slowly than usual. At the door, she hesitated. I got a call today, she said. Ethan's chest tightened. From? A center in Eugene, Claire replied. They're expanding. They want me to lead a small early intervention program. Full-time, benefits, stability. The words hung between them. That's good, Ethan said carefully. It is, Claire agreed, but it would mean leaving. Ethan nodded. He did not ask her to stay. He did not argue. He had learned, painfully, that holding too tightly broke things. Later, when the house quieted and Rex had settled into his nightly vigil, Ethan sat in the nursery chair with Eli across his lap, supported by pillows. Eli's breathing was uneven but calm. Noah slept nearby. Ethan spoke softly, not expecting response. I'm here, he said. You don't have to do anything. Eli's fingers curled against Ethan's sleeve. His lips moved, sound forming with effort, fragile and deliberate. Da. Ethan's breath caught. He did not correct. He did not praise. He stayed, letting the moment exist without claiming it. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, something fragile and real held its ground. The weeks that followed moved differently, as if time itself had learned to walk instead of run. Administrative leave gave Ethan something he had not possessed in years: uninterrupted mornings. Portland eased into early spring, rain thinning into intermittent showers that left the ground smelling clean and newly awake. The forest behind the house brightened with green tips at the ends of branches, small signs of persistence that required no permission. Ethan established a rhythm. He woke early, not because an alarm demanded it, but because Noah stirred with the pale light. Because Eli's breathing changed when the house warmed. Because Rex lifted his head at the first hint of day and waited for Ethan to notice. He learned the sequence of care the way he once learned crime scenes, by paying attention. How Noah preferred his head supported a little higher. How Eli calmed faster when Ethan counted quietly under his breath. How Rex positioned himself between the cribs and the window at night, then between the kitchen and the door in the morning, a habit etched by years of service and reinforced by age. Claire came every day. She said nothing yet about Eugene. She wore softer colors now, linen blues, pale greens, and she laughed more often, brief sounds that surprised her as much as they did Ethan. Her work remained precise, deliberate, but the edges had relaxed. She no longer watched the clock. She watched the children. One afternoon, as sunlight broke through the clouds in long, slanted bands, a car pulled into the driveway. Ethan felt the old tightening, then let it go. Rex rose and wagged once before settling again. The visitor introduced herself as Dr. Miriam Lawson, a pediatric neurologist Ethan had met only once before. She was in her mid-40s, average height, with close-cropped black hair and glasses that slid down her nose when she spoke too quickly. Her manner was brisk but not cold, shaped by years of delivering careful truths without drama. She carried no air of miracle working, only the steady confidence of someone who trusted process more than promise. I wanted to see them in their environment, Dr. Lawson said as she set her bag down. Not a clinic, not fluorescent lights. She observed quietly. She asked questions. She made notes. She watched Ethan lift Noah with practiced care, watched Claire guide Eli's hands with patience that bordered on reverence, watched Rex reposition himself when Eli startled, a subtle move that made room without drawing attention. "There's progress," Dr. Lawson said finally. "Not sudden, not linear, but real." Ethan nodded. He did not need exaggeration. "Consistency is doing the heavy lifting here," she added. "And presence." When she left, she squeezed Ethan's arm lightly. "Whatever happens with your job," she said, "don't undo this." That night, the house settled into a quiet that felt earned. Rain tapped lightly against the roof. Not a threat, just a reminder. Claire lingered after the boys slept, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. "I need to give them an answer," she said at last. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly. "I know. They want me in 2 weeks." He nodded. He did not speak. He had learned the cost of filling silence with fear. "I could do good work there," Claire continued. "Build something." "Yes." She studied him then, eyes searching his face for something she would not ask for directly. Ethan felt the urge to promise. He resisted it. "Stay," he said instead, not as a command, not as a plea. "If you want to." Claire exhaled slowly, the breath trembling at the edges. "I want to," she said, "but I'm afraid." "Of what?" "That if I stay because this feels like a family, I'll lose myself again." Ethan considered that. "Then don't stay because of us," he said. "Stay because of you." She laughed softly, a sound caught between relief and disbelief. "You're better at this than you think." The decision came quietly. Claire declined the offer from Eugene. She did not dramatize it. She sent a brief email. Then she sat on the back steps with Rex beside her, letting the afternoon sun warm her shoulders, and breathed. The letter from the department arrived the following week. Administrative leave would end. Ethan would return to duty in a modified role. Training, oversight, fewer nights, fewer sirens. It was not a punishment. It was an adjustment. Finch's handwriting scrawled a final note in the margin. "Do the job. Keep the life." Ethan folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the kitchen calendar, where appointments and feeding times were penciled in careful blocks. That evening, he did something new. He bathed the boys himself. The water was warm, steam fogging the mirror. Rex stationed outside the bathroom door like a sentinel. Ethan moved slowly, narrating each step the way Claire had taught him, the way the children understood best. Noah splashed weakly, startled by the sensation, then settled. Eli's fingers traced the edge of the tub, curious and intent. Wrapped in towels, the boys were heavier than Ethan expected, their damp hair smelling faintly of soap and something sweeter. He carried them into the nursery, heart pounding with the fragile certainty of someone doing something that mattered. Claire watched from the doorway. She did not intervene. Ethan sat in the chair with Eli supported across his lap, Noah resting against his chest. He did not hum. He did not sing. He breathed. Rex lay at his feet, eyes half closed, content. "I'm here," Ethan said, voice low, steady. "You don't have to hurry." Eli's gaze fixed on him. The room felt suspended, as if waiting for permission. Eli's lips parted. The sound came with effort, with intention, with a clarity that startled even him. "Dad." The word landed, fully formed, unmistakable. Ethan did not speak. His eyes closed, and when he opened them again, they were wet. He held the moment gently, as if it might bruise if handled too tightly. Noah stirred and pressed his face into Ethan's shoulder. A second sound followed, less clear but certain enough. "Da." Claire covered her mouth with one hand, breath catching. She did not step forward. She did not intrude. Ethan stayed. Later, after the boys slept and the house quieted into its night posture, Ethan and Claire stood at the kitchen sink, shoulder to shoulder, watching rain trace thin lines down the glass. "We did this," Claire said softly. "We stayed," Ethan replied. Outside, Portland breathed. Inside, a house that had once learned silence learned how to keep a word. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes, they come quietly, in the form of a child who dares to try one more sound, a dog who refuses to leave a frightened room, or a broken man who finally chooses to stay. Maybe God doesn't always remove the storm. Maybe he sends presence instead. A steady hand, a patient heart, a moment of courage that feels small, but changes everything. In our daily lives, we often wait for big signs, for answers that shout, for help that arrives all at once. But faith is often built in the quiet moments, when we don't give up, when we stay, when we choose love even while we're still afraid. If this story touched your heart, maybe it's because God is reminding you of something simple and powerful. You are not forgotten. Neither are the people or animals you care about. Please take a moment to share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story made you feel or where you're watching from. We read every single one. And subscribe to this channel if you believe in stories of healing, second chances, and quiet miracles. May God bless you and your loved ones. May He protect the vulnerable, comfort the weary, and give peace to every heart watching today. And may you never forget, even in silence, even in waiting, miracles are still happening. Amen.